Elizabeth Chatham, thanks for joining Lessons from Learning Leaders. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely happy to be here. It's great to connect again.
So we always start with the simple question. Tell me your story. It's not even a question. I keep telling people the most open questions don't even have a question mark at the end, but this is one that I love to ask. Tell me your story.
Wow. Where do I begin? I guess I can begin at 15 years old. I was thrown into politics at a very early age. I was the government exchange, uh, part of the government exchange program here in St. Augustine, Florida. And so we worked with a lot of local leaders, our congressional leaders, even into the Senate. And I loved it so much that after I was done with my exchange program, I walked into a member's office and said, I like what you do. I want to work for you so I can learn. He goes, okay. And so I started working my way up in his office. And then when I turned 16, I said, I want to work for you on Capitol Hill. And he goes, do you have a place to stay in DC? I said, why, of course I do. I have an uncle who works out of DC, so that won't be a problem. So my summers started working on Capitol Hill, worked my way up.
At
I,
16.
yes, at 16.
Wow.
And all it took was walking in and saying, this is awesome. I like what you do. I want to learn more. How do I become a part of it? So I started volunteering at 15, then legally at 16, I can work. And I was enjoying everything. So I said, I want to go to DC. Let's make this happen. But of course, being on Capitol Hill at 16, you become jaded really early in life. And especially when it comes to policy, politics, you see not only the good, you see the bad. And I was exposed to all of that at an early age. But I think it made me who I am today and got me to where I am today. Because of it, I then became the government affairs director for Canines for Warriors, which was an amazing experience. I wrote legislation with the former CEO, Rory Diamond, that
And
got
how old
passed.
were you then? Was this at 17 you're writing legislation?
No, I wish I was 17. This was many years later, and I'll age myself if I go any further. But no, this was several years later, in my 30s, and we wrote legislation. It got passed into law. Actually, when the Biden administration was in office, we did not get an invite to the White House at that time. Go figure. But that was one of my proudest moments. And then right after that, Americans for Prosperity stole me. So I had an opportunity to go into the field for Americans for Prosperity. So I know you know that organization very well.
I do.
And then as I worked my way up, and then of course you and I got to work together on the training team for a little bit with staff training. And then I had an opportunity after 7 years to take on another role, and I decided to jump, and that's what I'm doing now. I miss it. I miss the people I work with, but I'm very fortunate to do what I'm doing now. So,
So tell me about what you're doing now.
so I actually moved over. I'm the associate director of philanthropy for an organization called Human Life International, and it's a pro-life organization apostolate, which is basically an educator on pro-life issues from starting at conception all the way to death. We're actually working on a end of life handbook that everyone will be able to go to the website and take a look at to answer everyone's questions as a Catholic or even a Christian regarding pro life issues, especially when it comes to end of life. A lot of people are taking care of, their family members now, and there's always questions on how do we approach end of life? What is, you know, according to our Catholic teaching, what is towards our Christian teaching. And I love it. I work with a lot of our mid-level donors. I love them. They just like when we made phone calls with Americans for Prosperity, they always want to have a conversation. They're always telling me about the new best conspiracy theory that's going on in politics and in DC. But it's been a lot of fun. I'm not traveling, I'm home. Because of course there's been a lot of life changes going on with me and my husband here. So not traveling as much has been a blessing in disguise, but it's also led me to, as a newly adoptive parent, it has led me to be able to work with the Florida Association of Foster and Adoptive Parents, and they're and doing trainings for them. So I get to go back into my training role just recently was able to do that, and I did not realize how much I missed training. It's it when you leave it, you're like, "Oh, this is nice," and then when you go back into it, you're like, "No, this is where I belong."
There's something in there with what you said that makes me wonder, and I think people maybe they take it for granted. I don't know, but there's so much that we do in training that can be applied in so many other roles. And I'm thinking about the fact that you're working with donors now, and so often people get so nervous around donors, and I get it. All right, it's like a sales thing, and
Yeah,
but when you get into training, there's so much about what we do that's really just discovery. That's finding out, where are you at? What do you need help with? And a lot of that translates directly over to that. So I'm curious if you can talk about tell me how you're using skills that you learned as a trainer in the role dealing with philanthropy.
so as a trainer, we were taught to, number 1, listen. Listen to the needs of the person that you're talking to, and it's all about listening. It's not about selling yourself and what you're selling at first, because you don't wanna come in too hot. So it's about learning who the person is and getting to know them personally. Um, you created a training way back when of how to sell freedom without getting into a fight. I've actually that resonated in my brain for quite a while because it talks about all the mirroring, the labeling, all the different communication sets that you need when having a conversation. And one of the biggest takeaways from that training was it's okay for someone to be wrong, even if you know they're wrong, and not to argue with that.
Yeah,
And I've
that came from a book written by Arthur Brooks
Yes.
called Love Your Enemies.
Yeah.
And it was one of those what I call put your book down moments. It's one of those times when you read something and you're like, "Whoa."
Yeah.
And you literally you don't even think about it. You just put your book down and you're like, "Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay." And I remember Arthur Brooks wrote, "Look, it's okay to let people be wrong." And because for so long, whether it's there's that old cartoon of, the guy at the computer and
Yeah.
there's the bubble, "Are you coming to bed? No,
Yeah.
there's someone wrong on the internet." It's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay to let people
Yeah.
be wrong
Yeah.
because very often if you point that out right then, you're gonna close that conversation off and you're gonna prevent yourself from making any kind of progress with them because
Yeah.
now it's a
Absolutely.
more of, "I'm right, you're wrong. No, you're wrong, I'm right," that sort of thing. Sorry,
Yeah,
I
and I think
interrupted, but
that
yeah.
no, no, absolutely, but that I think is very important in what I do working with donors, because there has been many times, especially with our older donors, we have a older generation that are our donors here at Human Life International, and so a lot of times they are wrong, but you just let them go and you let them have that conversation. And that's really resonated with me working with donors. Now, my husband will say something completely different. And you know my husband, so that's a little different. But I think that is one of the biggest lessons from training, and I've been able to utilize, that in my last training for the Florida Association of Foster and Adoptive Parents. I did, at their state conference, I did a training on from caregiver to change maker. And one of the biggest items that everyone in that training said is when they are trying to advocate for either their foster child, their adoptive child, whoever it may be, it always comes across as they're complaining. And so utilizing that, and the number one question that I asked, I said, but are you listening to the social worker or to the agency that you're working on to see what they're really saying? Because sometimes agencies they're not trained to communicate. Some of them have been just thrown in a role and have not had the proper training for staff development. And I said, are you telling your story and utilizing personal stories that you can hear and little cues, taking the cues from the agency, the social worker, the medical provider, whoever you're working with to advocate for these children? And they said, "No." So we actually at the end of that training, I had them do a whole training around the room because, I don't use PowerPoints or, anything, talking to them. We have them very involved, and they created their own story, their own message. And I had one who actually recently just texted me back and said, "Oh my gosh, it worked." And I said, "Well, what did you do different?" And she's like, "I knew this caseworker was wrong, but I didn't argue with her. I let her be wrong. I listened for a special cue and built off of that cue." And she was able to get the child the necessary resources that she needed to get that had been months of advocating for. And I don't think people, realize that training is used in your everyday life. And that's why training is so important. And it's frustrating to see other organizations not put that as a priority.
Tell me more.
I think people have become fearful of training because they see training as you're going online and you're in a room and you have someone talking at you for 8 hours or however it may be to tell you how to do their job. And they see it as, here comes someone who's never worked in my job, but they're going to tell me how to do it. So they become fearful of training. It's not like that. If I, as you know, I went through the Bob Pike training too. And I think if we all learn to train using Bob Pike's methods and facilitation and really getting everyone involved, we would have much better staff development. We would have better organization development and even government. Um, because you let them be a part of it, and when they see that they're actually part of the training and they're guiding it, it's a different result. And there's people who said, "Yeah, my training was I got a 300-page binder and it didn't explain how to do anything. It just told me all these policies that are 15 years old." And training can be fun and it can be done virtually. COVID put us in that virtual world where we can do it virtually and make it fun. And now that we're back in person, it can be fun. And if you allow the conversations to happen, it opens up a bigger world for everyone.
So I have this book right next to me, Master Trainer Handbook by Bob Pike, and as you can see, I mean, it's well read.
Yeah,
Well read, and I was just going through this the other day, and you said training could be fun, which brought
right.
me back to Pike's 3rd law. Learning is directly proportional to the amount of fun you have. And what he meant by that is this is what I have underlined. I'm referring to the sheer joy of learning that can come from involvement and participation, from realizing that you can use your own energy to learn and enjoy learning because you're gaining information, tools, and techniques that benefit you. And there's another part of that you mentioned also that I think is key. Bob would talk about the fact that we do training to improve performance. We don't do training to deliver content. And when you said they came back to you and said it worked, tell me about that feeling when you heard that.
I was happy for her. I wasn't happy for me because as an adoptive parent, and my story has been crazy going through the adoption process because ours was a little bit different. We adopted two children from foster care with a lot of trauma. It's been advocating and having to really fight for them. I was happy for her. I didn't think at the moment that, "Oh my gosh, I made a difference. I transformed one person in this world." I was truly happy for her moving forward, knowing that she now knows how to advocate and utilize tools. But then it made me think, how can I expand on this? Where can I take this training? Who wants this training? And just move in a further direction and show people that training can be fun and it works. Again, it delivers performance. It's not about telling you how to how to do your job. It's about getting it's about getting real results. Um, I was excited. It was first excited for her, and then it just got my brain going of how do we move forward and where do we take this on the road? Because I was like, this is why I do training, whether I'm doing it full time or just occasionally here and there. This is why I do training.
You said earlier that a big part of training was listening, and I think that for some trainers that may come as a surprise. And I was wondering if you'd tell me more about that because that's a paradigm shift that I've seen a lot of trainers need to make. Why is, in your opinion, listening so important?
Because they're there for a reason and they're coming to your training potentially with a different ideology or idea that they want to learn. And so every training that I do, especially this one, is I put up on a big wall post-it, what do you want to learn? And what do you need to learn? And I let them put the post-its and I read through them so I knew what I needed to hit the best that I could in that training. I think that it's very important to listen because a lot of times they know this content. They just don't know how to put it together. It's not like you're starting from scratch. They may have some great ideas that you never thought of. We did have two social workers in that training who were able to give a different light. And because I listened to them and understood, they said, guys, listen, we are overworked and we don't make that much money. We are going 24/7 sometimes. They don't get a weekend. And to listen to that and understand and incorporate that in what you're doing and how to advocate and use that part of your story, there's other sides. It always goes back to, for me, and we tell the kids this or my niece, there's always 3 sides to a story. Now, this is our philosophy. There's one side, there's the other side, and there's really what happened. So being able to listen, you listen to the foster and adoptive parents who are struggling. You've listened to the caseworkers who are struggling, and many did not understand that. And it opens a bigger light and more understanding, and it opens that communication to have full communication to where you can get a resolution. It's not just one side against the other. And it brings everyone together. And that's why I really think listening, and that's the first thing I do when I go into training. I don't start off with, "Hey, I'm Elizabeth. This is my background. I've had all these training hours. I've done." No, it's about, "Hey guys, why are you here? Tell me about yourself. I want to learn about you." And I incorporate that into the training. And that goes with knowing cues.
Yeah, I think one thing that we can take from what you just said is you're starting to learn more about the people in the room.
Yeah.
And those people in the room also have things to add to the training. And very often we see folks who get in the mindset of being the sage on the stage, right? I'm here. Wait until you get a load of me. You guys are going to be so impressed.
Yeah.
You're lucky to even have me in the room with you. I mean, do you know how much I know that I'm about to bequeath upon you? You should be thankful. And that whole mindset of being the listener turns you more into the guide by the side, right? And what I like about that also is you're learning about the resources in the room that can help you prepare the people in the room to be even higher level performers than you could do by yourself.
Yeah.
So when you hear there's 2 people in the room who are already caseworkers, you're thinking to yourself, "Okay, there's resources there, there's stories there, there's experience there that I don't have, that they do, that they may be able to help with the room." How important is it to you to find that stuff in the room and pull that out for the people who are there?
Oh, very important because it's also important for me. I mean, I don't know everything. I love learning more. And if I can utilize one person in a training room to learn more, that is more valuable than I think anything else is being able to find those resources. And it's great to see I mean, even in past trainings when I was training for the states, with Americans for Prosperity, you would see the connection and then you would see relationships being built and again, problems being solved. And so the more resources, the more you can learn leads to more open communication and understanding, leads to better problem solving.
Yeah, and I think it's important. Tell me if you disagree. I know you will.
I
Uh,
mean, I always disagree with you, Dwayne, right? You're
I
like my
think
big brother, so I
I
can
think
disagree with you.
I like what you're doing in that right from the beginning. You're pulling information out of them rather than giving it to them. Because one thing that you and I have both done is this human lineup at the beginning where we say line up by the amount of experience you have. And then we will split the room up based on experience so that we don't have a group of tables that are the veterans, the folks who are sitting back there going, I learned all this 20 years ago.
Mhm.
Why am I here? And that's a legit concern. And I hear that too, that we have people who go to these things and they're not learning anything. That doesn't mean it's a waste of their time. We just need to recognize those people and get them in a position where they can create value. And by splitting people up by experience, you could have someone at the table who's got 20 years experience sitting with somebody who was just hired yesterday.
Yeah.
And that's where that value comes from.
It also makes them feel uncomfortable, and being uncomfortable I had someone in the training room, he was hilarious. He's like he was sitting at the table with his wife, and he's like, "I'm not going to join a table. Why?" And they walked in the room, and they're like, it wasn't set up like a classroom. So he's like, "Why isn't this set up like the other rooms? Why I'm
Right.
sticking with my wife." And I said, "Well," I said, "how many years of experience do you have?" Because we didn't have time, unfortunately, for the human lineup. And so we started with a different opener. And he goes, "Well, I've been at this for 15 years." And I said, "Well, you can be very valuable to that group over there that just started." I said, "How about you help them and give your insight?" And his wife was like, "Bye," his typical lifestyle was like, "Yeah, bye."
She
And
couldn't
so
get rid of him
abso
fast enough, huh?
yeah, right, he couldn't move fast enough for her, but then at the end, I didn't think about the training as he knows everything because he did walk away. He said, "I never thought to utilize this aspect when I'm advocating so I don't sound like I'm complaining." He goes, "Because I'm very hot-headed and I just go in for the kill, and I never thought to take a step back and, utilize what they're saying or, come across and use my story because your story humanizes what you're going through. And some people are just black and white people. They've been told one thing, so they do it that way. So absolutely, surprisingly, and we're on the record, I do agree with you. Um, and it's not to point out who's more experienced than the other. And I think sometimes I have seen that in the human lineup. They're like, oh no, but it's really fun too in the human lineup to do it when they can't speak at first and to really see what they've perceived of the other person before the training actually started. So it tells you a lot about one's perception too.
Yeah, and I think that what I like about that is it also makes those connections where it might be, "Hey, Elizabeth, you've been doing this for 20 years. Do you have your email so I can email you questions when I have
Yeah.
them?"
Yeah.
And then you're taking that training out of the classroom and you're getting it you're moving out there where it's actually gonna be applied. You listen at the beginning, you find out all this stuff. How are you using listening throughout the training then? And there's gonna be times where you've gotta talk clearly, right? There's gonna be things the room doesn't know that you need to make sure they know. How are you using listening to make sure that you cover all the topics you need?
So, number one, it gives me great examples. I end up, although I have my outline, I always have scenarios for an exercise. So it changes the scenarios and we're using real world scenarios because I'm listening to what they want and what they want to work on.
So
And
you have a plan. Let me see if I understand this right. You have a plan going in, but as you're listening to what they're talking about, and you're editing the training on the fly, saying, "Okay, we're going to
yeah,
scrap this idea over here, and we're actually moving with this idea over here because this is a better idea."
Absolutely. I went into this last training, I had 10 different scenarios. Um, I think I used maybe 3 of them when I passed them out, and I said, "No, we're actually gonna use this scenario," and to see them, they're like, "Whoa, what?" And they're like, "You heard that?" I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And I use those cues to answer the questions as well, because someone's asking a question that's related to someone else's experience. So that's why listening is so important. Sometimes I do miss the cues. I'm human. But it helps. And it helps you be adaptable. And of course, being a military wife, you have to be able to adapt and overcome. But yeah, I have a basic plan. And that's why, too, when I'm coaching anyone who wants to learn how to be a better trainer, you have your outline, but you're not going to follow it 100%. There's going to be change, be able to do that. And yeah, I scrapped it and I said, let's use these examples because they were real world examples that was going to help them get to the end result that they needed.
All right. What about as you wrap things up or even getting into after the training? What are you listening for then?
I'm listening to how they feel. I'm listening to see if there's inquiring minds, to see if there's something that wasn't answered. I do always ask that question. I said, "Hey guys, is there anything that we haven't touched or did I miss it?" I go through that list that they put up on the wall. And I'm also listening to see what new relationships have been formed or resources have been connected. And I think that's very important. That ties it in to my closing exercise. Uh, and so I love, unless they've been in a training of mine and this is, a repeat, as I like to say, repeat customer, I love closing with that exercise, rock, paper, scissors. And listening at the end helps me be able to tie the message in together for them at the end.
Yeah, that rock, paper, scissors comes from Sardik Love, who's been on the podcast a couple times. And it's a great closing exercise that I'll let you learn from Sardik, not from me or from Elizabeth, but it is a great way to bring everyone
Yeah.
together there at the close. If someone wants to get in touch with you and they say, "Hey, this sounds good. I want to learn more from Elizabeth," how can they get in touch with you?
So, typically my email, which is just EG and then my last name, Chatham, CHATHAM 18 at gmail.com. That would be the best way, and just put training in the subject or want to learn more. I am always available by email and then I will make sure to follow up. And I'm always here to help anyone who wants to learn more. Again, I'm still learning how to be a better trainer. I'm not in it full time anymore, but I'm still learning how to be a trainer, and I'm always looking for more resources.
All right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. We're coming up on the 30-minute mark. Tell me
Yeah.
one last thing that you want to leave everyone with.
One
It can
last
be
thing.
about my brilliance if you want, what it was like to work with me all these years.
Yeah, I do tell everyone I learned from some of the best. I don't necessarily tell them your name right away. No, I'm kidding. I tell them I learned from Sardine Glove and Bob Pike. No. One thing is don't be afraid. I think people let fear run them too much when it comes to this learning world and training world. Don't let fear run you. Just jump in. It's worth it.
All right. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye.